Chris and I wanted to give you an opportunity to listen in on a conversation that we've had about writing books. We both recently completed a long process of authoring a book, and we want to talk to you a little bit about what it looks like to write a book, but also the process that goes into the sort of the design of the book, the design of the concept. Chris and I have a lot of conversations back and forth, and so we're going to give you a chance to listen in on that as we talk. Now, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Dan Owolabi. I lead an international nonprofit called Branches Worldwide, but I also lead a domestic leadership organization called Owolabi Leadership, and essentially work with CEOs and companies to help leaders within that organization become more genuine, effective influencers, more authentic leaders. And so excited to have this conversation with Chris because, again, this is just something that we've done over and over and over again. We want to help people who are sort of thinking through this writing process.
And guys, if you don't know who I am, I'm Chris White. Most of the time, I spend my time as the managing partner at White Law Office. We're a small rural firm in Eastern Ohio who are trying to shake up the way legal services are delivered to the rural marketplace and beyond. Really proud of my team that I've built over the years. And, you know, Dan and I were writing these books right alongside each other for a little while without knowing it. And then going into it. And like Dan said, we're going to talk today a little bit about that process, about what we did and about those books in specific. But, you know, the team building work that I've done at my firm to try and create and innovate and create something new in the way that we deliver legal services really informed me of what that's doing. Outside of the firm, I'm a huge nerd, massive geek when it comes to it, big storyteller. I am a fan of story across all types of forums. You know, from the movies to books to podcasts to Dungeons and Dragons games. I mean, I'm a massive nerd when it comes to that stuff out of this. And so that's, you know, about us. But Dan, I want to go ahead and jump right into this here. And I want to start with you. You wrote your book, and I have it right here, Authentic Leadership. Fantastic book, full of amazing stories, amazing truths. But answer this first question. Why this book?
Yeah, you know, so I think the best books come out of our own experience. They come out of our own lived sort of story. And for me, I struggled with insecurity for years, finding myself in different leadership positions where I was leading people who were very different than me, different background than me, and different sort of experience than me. And what I found was that the most effective way to lead people is to not just to be yourself, but to be yourself in the service of other people, to be the best version of yourself in the service of the people. And so after seeing that work in my own life and then watching myself lead through different circumstances, I also started to see other leaders that were dealing with insecurity in a very real way at all kinds of levels. It's amazing. I was a pastor for 10 years, Chris, you know this. I was a pastor. It's amazing when you talk to leaders as a pastor, they'll tell you things that they would never tell their spouse. They would never tell anybody else. And I saw that insecurity come out again and again and again. So when I became the leader in Owolabi Leadership, one of the things that I started to do was start putting down some ideas on how I could help these leaders deal with insecurity and lead more authentically. And so it's great to watch people read the book, and it's great to see this happen. But that's why the book came out. I saw a real problem in the real world and wanted to help it.
Man, and I was thinking, Dan, about those stories. And I know one of your favorite ones to tell is also the ones that impacted me the most out of the book. The story of your mom. And how she got to where she was, and that perseverance and that lead. I sat there after reading that chapter, and I was just like, I have never done anything that difficult in my entire life.
Well, you built a law firm. That's not easy, right?
It's not easy. But I mean, it put it in perspective, the journey of your mom and the story to telling and how you weave that into the truths and how it lays the foundation for an understanding of leadership that you have is just, folks, you really need to go out and grab Dan's book and read this, even if it's just for that story. Now, there's a ton of other great stuff in there, but that story and the way you tell it is just amazing. Dan, there's tons of time that you could have, you know, taken these truths from, you've realized from other leaders, and there's tons of time. But why now? Why did this happen now for this book?
Yeah, I think the timing of this book has been excellent. You know, I couldn't have scripted it any better. I think God definitely ordained it. But for me, you know, what I see right now are a lot of leaders that are struggling to deal with race issues and struggling to deal with the effects of COVID-19 on their business. And typically leaders tend to have a lot of answers for people when they come to them and say, hey, what do we do next? Or how do we address this issue? But these are two very big and complicated things that leaders can't fake their way through.
Right.
And so the answer for leaders is to be authentic. But it's tricky because you don't want to be 100% transparent and tell people that you're scared and that you don't know what you're doing. But you also want to be honest, and you want to be open with people. And so how do you do that? Authentic leadership addresses that. So you're able to be your genuine self in the service of other people. So I think this timing of this book is great.
That's so it's so interesting. You and I were both writing these books. We both had aspirations of releasing them this spring, late spring, early summer. We had no idea what was going to be happening. We had no idea what was going to happen this year. And just the turmoil and uncertainty and chaos surrounding all of this. And I love what you said there, is that authenticity isn't saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Authenticity is more. Could you build on that for a second, though, especially when you look at authenticity in leading through turmoil, chaos, uncertainty? Could you build on that just a little bit more? Because I think you're right. I think it's more than just saying, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think oftentimes people think authenticity is transparency, and it's not. In one of the chapters of the book, I talk about airline pilots. And airline pilots are charged with the task of leading the entire plane, right? Stewardesses, people in the cabins, everything. And in moments of uncertainty, when there's a lot of turbulence or there's a storm or something, the very worst thing that an airline pilot could be is transparent. Hey, everybody, I'm scared. I've never been, in this situation before. People flip out. I give all kinds of examples where airline pilots are needlessly transparent. It makes things worse.
Yeah.
But authenticity, again, is being the best version of yourself in the service of other people. And so it's finding a way to dig deep and work through seasons of turmoil and applying the right level of transparency in the right moment so that it's helpful for people, so that people see you as genuine and as real and as ready to serve them. And there's other things that you might say to a private person, or you might say behind closed doors, one-on-one, maybe to a confidant, that you don't say out loud. But ultimately, you want to be the type of person that says sort of the right thing that's genuine in the right way at the right time. And that's complicated. And I talk about the details in the book.
Yeah.
But let me jump on this real quick, Chris. As far as the timing of this moment, again, just a lot of uncertainty with COVID-19. Right. In your book, you talk a lot about teamwork and the downfall of people who try to go it alone and just assume that they can pull themselves up by their own bootstraps without utilizing the entire team to solve a particular problem. I love the arc of your story. Help me understand why you decided to write a story like this right now, because it's very, very helpful and very needed.
Boy, I wish I could say I had this all envisioned, this isolating event that's been happening in our society envisioned when I started writing this, but I didn't. I had my own isolating experience of leadership. And you and I have talked about this a number of times, that leadership is an isolating event in people's lives. When they take on the leadership, whether it's a nonprofit organization, a business, whatever it is, they take on leadership, there's this isolating effect that happens. And that is really a toxic mentality that I partnered with the idea of bootstrapping. The original meaning of bootstrapping was you grab yourself by your bootstraps, you pick yourself, and you throw yourself over the fence, which was meant to imply something that was impossible to do. And it's tried to be co-opted, and I really don't find it as a convincing co-option of bootstrapping, that somehow I'm a self-made person and self-made man. But I was in that. And Bootsville comes out of my experience as a leader and just getting fed up and saying, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at doing this by myself. And in fact, I am in the way of success. And so my experience of isolation, my experience of leadership isolation and that bootstrapping mentality, and I have to be everything and do everything for my business and, be the man from the mountain, as it were. It coalesced into my team building journey, which is a much longer story that I won't go into right now, but it coalesced into a team building story. That crisis of isolation forced me to a place where I realized it's okay. I don't have to do this by myself. And in fact, I probably shouldn't be. And it's just amazing how this current environment is imposed isolation. And people are reacting out of it in so many varied ways. There's so many ways that this is just going sideways for them. in their personal lives. I speak from this as an attorney. Our domestic relations practice is up because the isolation is causing so much strain and so much stress on people. Businesses are questioning whether they're going to be able to succeed. Even now with limited reopenings and broader scale reopenings happening across the country, it really is a question of whether they're going to succeed. And so what happens is that isolation is almost amplified in the side of this environment. And that bootstrapping mentality that if I just dig deep enough, if I just try hard enough, I just pull on those straps hard enough, you don't realize that you're creating your own strain. You're pulling against yourself. And for me, for writing Bootsville and writing about the narrative that it is of the team building and the way that Stanley and Sky and Freeman find one another and accomplish something that wasn't possible while they were all still holding on to their bootstraps, is so poignant for this time right now. My team and my business would not be successful if I did not have all of these people coming around. And we are constantly fighting against that urge to isolate and just say, if I do enough on my own, because that is a real fear, that if I just work harder, this will be better. And the reality of it is there's no amount of work that you could do to get rid of a virus.
Can't do it on your own. Right.
You can't do that. But
you need others.
In the same way, there's no amount of work you can do to become an expert at something that just isn't in your wheelhouse.
That's right. That's right.
And so that's, for me, why Bootsville? Why that book? What it meant to me was freedom. Freedom from that self-imposed isolation of leadership, where you feel like if you just pull hard enough against yourself that you're going to be able to succeed.
That's right.
Into the ability to have a team around you of amazing people who take you further and far beyond where you even thought you could go.
That's right. That's right. What I love about the book, and this is something that I think is so good when you read a story. Now, for those of you who haven't read Chris's book or haven't read my book, either one, we wrote two different kinds of books.
Yeah.
I mean, my book has lots of stories, but a lot of very clear points. Do this, do this, do this. Chris is a story the whole way through. And what I love about the way you write the narrative is that you bake into the story these moments of awakening, where Stanley just slowly starts to understand things. And it almost helps the reader realize that they're starting to understand things along with Stanley. I mean, it's amazing. And so, ultimately what I want to know is, why did you pick that sort of story narrative? Why didn't you do, by the way, I'll back up a second. For people who hate reading leadership books, Chris's book is for you. It is a book that you'll be able to pick up and read and enjoy and forget at the end that you read a leadership book. That's how good it is. But why did you pick that story mentality? Why didn't you do it the conventional, which is what I did? Have a point, tell a bunch of stories, have some anecdotes, help people understand, and then move on.
Dan, I appreciate that question tremendously, because I want to get back in for a second, and I'll promise I'll keep this short. We are, at our core, I really truly believe, as a species, as humans, we are storytelling and story consuming beings. Story defines who we are as people. The stories we tell about ourselves, the stories we tell about where we came from and the people we came from, the stories that we tell about where we're going that we haven't been to yet, define us. They define the way we perceive the world, opportunities versus crisis. They define the way that we see other people versus this is a detractor from me versus this is a person I can bring alongside me to do amazing things in their area. Those stories are core to who we are as people, which is why I leaned into story so hard, because I believe that story is the most powerful medium to allow people to explore truth where it resonates with them. Now,
that's right.
I step back from this and say, there is absolutely need to discuss those stories, to unpack them. And that's what I love about your book. You tell these amazing stories, and then you take the time to unpack some of the points that you're like, hey, I really want you to focus on this when it comes out of this. Not exclusively, but this is what I want you to focus on. But for me, it was, as I said, massive geek when it comes to story. I love the stories that leave you without a clear answer, so that you can wander around inside of it and you can pick apart it and you can always come back to it and say, oh man, I missed that before.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. And so that's what I hope to do with Bootsville, is create this world that people could explore inside of it, and they could pick up what resonated with them and maybe even go in a direction that I never intended in the first place, but that benefits them in a great way. So that's a little bit why, with a short amount of backstory.
Well, I love that because I think you and I have both read really good books where we read it in one decade and we got something out of it. Then we put it down and picked it up, 10 years later. We're like,
Yeah.
I see this completely differently given your experience, and you pick up on different nuances. That's a great story where it means something different to you, years later. And so that's what I think is going to happen for a lot of people when they read Bootsville more than once. I love what you're saying there.
I hope so. And that, when it comes down to why I wrote it with the hope that the story would go out there, and maybe even the first time through, people go, oh, that was okay. But then it would permeate, kind of ferment over time, and hopefully get better over time. But I want to switch gears back to you for a second here. I want to talk about authentic leadership. What is your goal? What do you hope at the end of the day, somebody picks up authentic leadership and they're reading it and they put it down at the end of the day? What is the one thing? I know there's a lot of things they could take from it. What is the one thing that you're wanting for people when they read authentic leadership?
Yeah. So what I want more than anything for people is to have a sense of confidence when they're leading. I want genuine confidence where they don't feel like they have to know everything. They don't have to have all the answers. They don't have to be the sage on the stage. They don't have to tell people what to do, but they can walk into a room and they can know a process on how to lead people effectively. They can know, okay, first I have to understand myself. Then I have to, lead myself. I have to demonstrate that I actually know what I'm talking about and I practice it. And then they're the type of people who can understand other people and really kind of get into their head, empathize with others. And then finally, they're the type of people who can cast vision and get people excited about going in a particular direction together to solve a real world problem. When I see people leading with confidence, not insecurity, I see the type of people who can go through all kinds of difficult things, knowing that they're the right leader for the moment because they've done the work to actually build up to that moment when their leadership is necessary. And so I want to see lots and lots of people lead with confidence, because right now, just between you and me and everybody else who's watching, I see a ton of insecure leaders who have ridiculous problems. I mean, they've got the cart before the horse. They're trying to lead before they really understand their own issues. They're trying to lead before they've ever learned to lead themselves. They're trying to lead before they've even taken the time to understand the people that they're leading. And so you see all that and you're like, okay, look, let's just back up a second. Let's start the process from the beginning. And if you do that, you'll have a lot more confident leaders out there. And that's really what I want.
That is, I know that, with what you do with Owolabi leadership, and I know what you're doing with branches worldwide, and trying to find 30 leaders in 30 countries and build that not just on a local, rural, or domestic basis, but on an international basis, create authentic leadership. It is so powerful when you see somebody who's leading out of their authentic self and you go, I want to follow that.
Yeah.
I want to get in that guy's tailwind, and I want to catch some of what they're doing, because, man, it just resonates. It just, you feel the pull towards that. Right. Versus you see an inauthentic leader. You see somebody who's trying to manifest something. And I'll be honest with you, between you and me and everybody listening, we have that problem in the legal field where you get the title lawyer and all of a sudden it equates with some form of authority. But it doesn't equate with leadership.
Right.
So you can have great, very talented lawyers who are leading from a place of authority downwards, but they're not, I take that back, they're not leading from authority downwards. They're not actually leading at all. They're just mandating in a downward trajectory. And they have to step back. And if they could find that authentic leadership, if they could find where they need to be inside of that, and surround themselves with other amazing people, they would go so much further.
That's right.
So I know it's not just a legal industry problem, but I see it a lot because, we have that title that you get that doesn't always equate to experience or ability to lead.
And here's the problem. I love that you're saying that. Here's the problem. I mean, no one ever taught you and I how to be leaders.
No.
Like there was no class, you and I both have graduate degrees, and never, as we went through it, anyone said, okay, here is step by step how you lead people with confidence and authenticity and love. I mean, so you almost have to learn it on your own unless you find a great book that shows you, okay, do this and not do this. And that's what I love about Bootsville. That's why I'm excited about authentic leadership, because it really kind of gives people a sense of here are the pitfalls you can fall into if you're not careful. I know you have, all kinds of experience in whatever field you're in, fine. But leading people in a particular direction and getting them to follow you, even if you didn't pay them or, even if, whatever, that's a different story. And
Yeah.
so we want to help you with that.
Yeah. And, to dovetail those two together, what I love about what authentic leadership does and what I hope Bootsville will do for people is resonate with them that they're not alone. There is a whole tribe of people out there who are trying to be authentic leaders and are trying to put themselves in a place where they can have the greatest impact, and then surround themselves with other people who amplify that impact by bringing their skills and their talents to the table. Because everything that I read, Dan, is this: authentic leaders aren't one-trick ponies that do everything by themselves. They're great leaders of teams. They're great leaders of organizations and teams as a whole, and they focus where they're the best in what they do. And everything else, they find somebody else who's better than them to do it. And I love that. I love that, how Bootsville, that's really the thrust of where I'm trying to go, is find people who are better than you to do better than you. And authentic leadership implicitly says this: you're not the man, you're not the sage on the stage, as you said, but you are the person who's the best doing this. And that's leading from an authentic place in your life these people forward.
That's right. That's right. No, I love that, man. I love that. If I could take I think it's chapter 8 of my book, and sort of slide Bootsville like right in there.
Yeah.
Because that's where I start talking about, in order to become a leader, you have to realize you can't go it alone. Like, leadership is realizing there's a real urgent problem out there that you want to fix, but you don't have the ability to actually get there on your own. You've got to bring a whole team with you, and you've got to empower them to lead alongside you. And so, yeah, I love that, man.
One of the things, and before we run too much attention span out of the people who are watching this, and we really appreciate everybody who's taking the time to listen to Dan and I talk about our books. I've gotten questions, and I know you have, about writing, about actually getting down and writing a book. And you know what? As much as we'd like to say these two books just manifested out of nowhere, it's a process, man. It's not even when you press publish on that button is that process done when it comes down to it. Could you talk a little bit about your process? Because yours was done while you were traveling to multiple countries, while you're out speaking. Yours was a little bit different than mine. So could you talk about your writing process and how you approach doing this?
Yeah, yep. So a couple things. I mean, this is good. A lot of people want to write a book, and it's a big process and a big project. And there's some hidden challenges in it. So I'll walk through a couple clear processes that I used, and then a couple challenges. So first off, what I did is I found a big idea, an idea that I got excited about when I talked about it, and I could talk about it for 30 minutes or more, just straight. That told me that I have a lot of content in my mind and a lot of stories that I've told along with this topic. And then what I did is I found that topic, and I made sure that it addressed an urgent problem in people's lives. So it wasn't something I just wanted to talk about, but I knew that it actually addressed an issue that other people were dealing with. So there was a need for it out there. And then I just made sure that there wasn't a lot of other stuff that I read about it. The market wasn't saturated with other books. So people can, get help from other people. I don't have to write another book on it. If they can find another book out there, I don't have to waste my time. They don't have to waste my time reading my book. They can just read someone else's book. I just had never read something that was based on what authentic leadership was all about, the way that I wrote it. And so I knew that it was time to write a book that way. So that was the first part. Mm-hmm. The second part was actually creating an outline, one that made sense, that sort of grabbed the reader and took them on this process. And so once I, created an outline, I took it to an editor and said, hey, what do you think? And, help me work through some things. And then you just start filling in the blanks, in practical terms. You have an outline with like 8 chapters. You take chapter 1, you break that into 4 different sections based on that idea. And then you start doing research. You sort of, you treat each chapter like a bucket. And you tell yourself, I'm going to spend 2 weeks throwing ideas into that bucket. Everything that I read, if it makes sense, I'm going to cut and paste it. I'm going to put it in this bucket. You can use whatever program you want to, or you can actually use paper and write notes and throw it into a real bucket, whatever. But ultimately, you want to get as much information on that topic as you possibly can that you think is interesting. Once I did that for every chapter, then I just started writing. That first draft was taking all those notes and sort of sewing them all together in a way that made sense. And finally, then once I wrote that first draft, took it to an editor, had a whole bunch of pages, and she just started slicing it. You know what I mean? Oh,
Yeah.
you were with it at her. That's the best work you can produce. You're like, here's my baby. And they're
Yes.
like, this sucks. You know,
Right,
they
right.
rip it up. They have to start again. You're like, that
Yeah.
was the best I've ever done. What do you mean start again? So yeah, that was the process. And it finally turned out after multiple months and multiple rounds of editing, it finally came out to a product that the best I'd ever written, and something that I could really stand behind and say, I'm really proud of that work because I know the time that went into it.
It's interesting that you say that because, I approached mine as I want to tell a story. I just want to tell this story, in such a way that it's like I want it to be compelling. I want it to be inspiring. I want people to be excited of that, they're not alone, that they got a chance to move forward. And so mine was much more organic. But that's also a little bit misleading when I say that, because you've seen some of the work that went into it before the story ever came out.
I did. Let me tell the story. So, you and I are sitting across the table from each other at Muddy's, and we're talking about, maybe writing a book, maybe not. And I'm like, I've got a book in my mind. You're like, I've got a book in my mind too, and you're thinking about writing it. And then you pull out this sheet of paper that has like all this like detail, and it's like diagrams. I'm like, you're not thinking about writing a book, man. You already have like this whole concept ready to go with like color coding arrows. And I'm like, dang, dude, like you're way ahead of me. So I totally get what you're saying.
And it sounds like it when you say, hey, where did the story come from? Well, the story actually was based on a whole lot of thought and structure and organization that is not explicitly put into my story. It's all the underpinning, it's all the paradigm, it's the world around the story that kind of gives context to it and helps it move through and flow. And so, you saw the need, you saw the gap that you wanted to fill with your information. For me, it was going, how do I tell this to people in a way that they haven't heard it before? Yeah. Because what I find is that toxic mentality of isolation and that bootstrapping mentality actually becomes a worldview for people. It becomes the way they view that they have to do things. And since I strongly believe that we're narrative creatures, that we're storytellers and story consumers at heart, that one of the best ways I thought of approaching a worldview as powerful as bootstrapping and as isolating as bootstrapping was to tell a story about it. Tell a story about how this works. And, for me, it was organic. It was, all right, I want to tell this story. I want to tell this arc. It was being unafraid to share it along the way. And, you participated in helping me identify some needs for the arc of that story that I then was able to sew into it and bring it to a more satisfying conclusion even than I had previously wrote before. So for me, it was very organic, very collaborative. That's the thing I was trying to pursue.
Yeah, no, and I love that. I definitely saw that. Again, the fact that you use a story made the concept that's dangerous for a lot of people, made it much more palatable. Like, here's an example from your story. So Stanley is a guy who, is pulling himself up by his bootstraps. But ultimately, he gets to a point when he actually like snaps his bootstraps.
Yep.
And like, I'm not going to give away the ending here, but like, it's a huge deal. And everyone's like, hey, man, you did it, And he has this feeling of like reckoning, like, no, that's not what I need to do. And you talk about this whole social construct where people celebrate people who, quote unquote, do it on their own and pull themselves up off their bootstraps. And, we want to be celebrated as having done it on our own. And we want to tell that American story. But what I hear you saying, and basically the story, the whole book, Bootsville, illustrates is that no one does it on their own.
No.
And that everybody sort of has other people underneath them and beside them who've helped them create this. And so to take credit for something that seems like you did on your own is disingenuous at best. And so I love how you package that into a story when Stanley realizes, like, I know I'm being celebrated for this, but I'm not excited by it because I know that this isn't what I'm aiming for anymore. I love that.
The hollowness of isolation can have moments of tremendous excitement. But at the end of the day, when it comes back to just you and your own voice rattling around, it's a hollow experience.
Yep.
And I think, when we look at authentic leadership, when we look at what I'm trying to write in Bootsville, and we look at the current environment surrounding us right now, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's the addressing of systemic racial issues inside of our society that are being called out day after day after day, and we're being challenged to respond to those things. The desire for some is to retreat and to isolate and to try and do it by themselves. And I think the thing with authentic leadership in Bootsville is this: don't do that. Don't collapse on yourself. Don't be that black hole of energy that just sucks everything inside because you're uncertain or you're confused or you don't know what to do. Reach out, because there are others. There are people that can surround you and take you to the next place. Even though right now, I don't know if any of us really can honestly say what the next place is going to be. But authentic leaders are pointing us in that direction, saying, we're going to go there.
Together. Exactly right. I love it. I love it.
Well, folks, we appreciate so much your time listening to us. Dan's book, Authentic Leadership, is out on Amazon right now, and it is available to go get. And Dan, I think it's actually in a couple of the bookstores around our region as well.
Yeah. There's going to be a book signing actually on August 1st at the Gospel Bookstore. So it's an exciting opportunity. If you haven't already been there and picked it up, you can come on August 1st and I'll meet you in person.
Do we get a good Sharpie signing in there?
Oh, absolutely. I'll make it as sloppy as possible.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And for you, if you're interested in Dan's book, please pop out, grab it, support what he's doing. It is so important for independent authors like Dan and I that people like you step up and support us and these endeavors, because we're not backed by a big publishing house. We're not backed by deep pockets. We're doing this because we have a passion to see it happen, to see these stories told. And if you're looking for Bootsville, it's on Amazon, it's on Kindle, and it's on Apple Books. I appreciate it. If you read it and you think it's awesome, leave me a review. If you read it and you think it's a dumpster fire, leave me a review. You'll see some great reviews on both books on Amazon right now. If you want to go on, people who have read it left amazing reviews. I know Dan got you excited about your own book, and me as well, listening to how it's impacting people. So we appreciate the time everybody's taking. Dan, real quick, if folks want to learn more about Owolabi leadership and about Branches Worldwide, where should they go look?
Yeah, so great question. If you want to learn more about Branches Worldwide, we're all over social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. But of course, you can go to branchesworldwide.org to get more information. That has just sort of the complete one-stop shop for all the information about what we're doing, videos, everything. If you're looking for domestic leadership help, we love to help you with Owolabi Leadership. That's the company that I lead. And essentially, you can go to owolabileadership.com. You can also go to Owolabi Leadership on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We're there as well. But yeah, ultimately our goal is to help people internationally, but also help people domestically become better leaders. That's really what I'm all about. So
that's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. And if I can pitch myself real quick, if you guys want to see what we're trying to create at White Law Office, and you want to see a little bit about how we're trying to approach practicing law in a team-based environment and collaborative environment, where we seek to carry out 4 values: honesty, empowerment, innovation, and respect. Check it out on at thewhitelawoffice.com. We're also on Facebook. I think we have a small Instagram and Twitter presence, but the best place to find us is online at thewhitelawoffice.com. And you can see about my team. You can see about these people that have taken us beyond where I ever could have, because I'm real proud of them, and they're an amazing group of people.
They are amazing. Yeah.
Dan, thank you so much for sharing today. I'm excited again. Yeah, absolutely. And folks, if you need Dan or I for anything, you just reach out and say, hey, let's talk.
We'll make it happen. All right, man. I appreciate you, buddy. Thanks for facilitating the conversation. It's been good.
Absolutely. Thank you.